Welcome to Writers Not Writing. This used to be a show where I interviewed authors about the ways they procrastinated, and I'm sure we'll still have some of that. But in these times, I want to use this show to highlight artists who are using their voices to push back against fascism. Whether we're writing or not writing, we need to be defending one another. I'm Benjamin Gorman, your friendly author in exile, and the quiet guy behind the glass there is Doug the producer, who hitched a ride in my suitcase. I write novels and collections of poetry and stuff, and Doug does his best to make me sound better. Welcome to Writers Not Writing. You're going to enjoy today's show. And if you want a little more, become a patron of my Patreon, help me keep a roof over my head, and you'll get access to an ad-free version of the show with a bonus segment with each interviewee. Okay, here we go.
If I take my time.
Hail and well met, readers and reviewers. Welcome to Writers Not Writing. So I am here with one of our favorite returning guests. I believe Jason has been on the show more than any other guest at this point, except Doug the producer, who nobody can see, and the funny looking bald guy. But Jason, welcome. So Jason Brick is a dad, an author, a martial artist, a nerd with a debilitating travel habit, and most excitingly, and this is what I want to start talking about, a brand new book out. So tell everybody about the new book.
Well, thank you so much, Ben, for having me yet again. I love being a recidivist on great shows like this.
That's right.
A couple months ago, we talked about the fiction book I've got with you.
Yes.
I've got another book from my other main project, Safest Family on the Block. And that is out through YMAA Press. It's another small press like NotAPipe. They focus on martial arts and self-defense topics. And this book comes from my podcast that I've had running about 5 years now, where I go find experts on protecting our families and I wring them dry of information.
Yeah.
Now, one of the differences between my podcast and most of the other family safety products and projects out there is that most of them, as I'm sure you've seen in your own quest to find out how to protect your kids, they really focus on crime prevention and violence prevention. Yeah. And it's often a police officer, or there's one program run by a guy who was a Navy SEAL. And crime prevention is important, but it's not the whole thing.
Statistically speaking, it's not the thing you should be worried about. That's one of the, there are two big things I appreciate about the book. One, it's got a very realistic perception of risk, which is something that we are not as humans naturally inclined to do. We see things that are big and dramatic and sexy and go, those are the dangers, and they're not the most common dangers. But the other thing was the level of expertise. Like, you went out and found all these experts, and so this wasn't just, here's some guy who's, you've got a lot of personal experience, but it's not just your personal experience. It's all this, how many interviews did it take to produce this book?
So I was in the high 90s or low hundreds by the time the book came out.
Yeah,
and as you see, I got experts on everything, rather than just focusing on crime prevention. And for crime prevention, I have a former air marshal who also worked in corrections and was a top competitor on Top Shots. And I had a CIA agent on. But I also managed to find at the time, he was the paramedic in charge of medical response for San Francisco International Airport and the leading expert on preventing suicide in the entire nation of Canada. Because these people were so driven by their mission to keep people safe that they'll come take any excuse and share this information that they have literally earned with blood.
Yeah.
And get it out to as many people as possible.
And again, statistically, those are much bigger worries. The chance, the one that always gets me is, when we were growing up, way back when we're of a certain age, it was stranger danger. It was, you're going to be kidnapped by a total stranger. We have to train our children not to get into a van with somebody who's offering them candy or something. And it's like this. This is not the worry. The worry is something like, suicide. That is a terrifying thing for a parent, and learning how to look for signs. There's a lot to learn about suicide prevention.
Well, that's how the very inception of the project came from when we adopted my oldest son and I suddenly had a child. This was an in-family adoption, so it was the timeline from no kids to kid was about 2 weeks, as
Yeah.
opposed to most other child having experiences where it's years. And I realized during the first few moments that at that time, my 25 years of martial arts training, my bouncing, my bodyguard work, none of it prepared me
Yeah.
to protect my kid from the things that are actually going to hurt my kid.
Right. It's
And so that's
somebody
when
is
I
not
started
going to pick a
asking.
physical fight with your 2-year-old. Like that
Yeah,
is,
exactly.
like
Exactly. And if I'm on the ball, we're not going to get mugged because I've parked in a smart place. I understand the neighborhood. If it's sketchy, like, there are some areas of Portland where we both used to live, that there's a theater and you want to go to that show, but once the lights go down and the wildlife comes out, it's not the best. But you go and you know that, and you park accordingly, and you
right.
stay a little more aware. You make sure you leave the Rolex at home, as if I have a Rolex,
Right.
and you make those decisions, and
As
you
my
walk
dad
them
always says,
through.
head on a
Yeah,
swivel. Like you're just a
exactly.
little more aware in
Yeah.
places, when I would go to,
Mm.
participate in the protests in Portland. That's what he would
Yeah.
say to me before I would go every time. Just head on a swivel. Like just be
Yeah.
aware.
Just be looking
Those,
around.
speaking of things that were statistically so much safer than they were ever presented to be,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
you'd see all these images of violence, and then
Mhm.
I would be there with the camera and I'd go, I'm turning the camera around. There are people sitting at a restaurant. Like it
Yeah.
was not dangerous,
Yeah.
but it
Here
freaked
I'm in
people
the
out.
middle of downtown. You're looking for the violence
Yep.
inherent in the system,
Yep.
and you're
Yeah.
finding people drinking beer.
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, if
they
anything, they
are.
were, irritated because the tear gas was ruining their food. Like
Yeah.
it was not,
Spicy.
Portland's on fire. No, it's not.
No.
Here's the view from the other direction. It's just fine.
Yeah.
Like,
No, it was a mess. But that awareness that you're talking about, it serves a dual purpose. One is you might spot the bad guys. On the other hand, some bad guys are hard to they're hard to spot because they are professionals.
but
However, bad guys are cowards as a
right.
general rule.
They're
And if they see
looking.
you looking around, you got, as my good friend Alan Burris says, keep your head out of your apps, and you have your
Mm,
phone in your pocket,
yeah.
they're going to go bother somebody else. And you
Yeah.
feel kind of bad for them, but it's my job to protect my kids, not your kids.
Well, and I live in the city. I mean, speaking of crime stats, this is,
Yeah.
wild. Moving to Barcelona, like people here, it's classic. You turn on the news and there was a crime last night in Madrid, which is
Hmm.
6 hours away. But the
Yeah.
news is still, very dramatic. What is, if it bleeds, it
Hmm.
leads. What's the story, right? So I'm like, oh, this is a lot of stories of home invasions or whatever. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
it's one home invasion story ends up like taking the news for 2 weeks because
Hmm.
it's so vanishingly rare. And so I end up looking it up. The murder rate in Barcelona is not only lower than, Baltimore, New York, whatever. It's lower than my small town in Oregon. It is like two per year. Like
Yeah.
because there are even when there's a mugging, there's no firearms involved. Like,
Yeah.
but the city does have statistically one of the highest rates of pickpocketing. In
Hmm.
they brag about it. They're like, I think we're number two on the list now after Rome or whatever. Like they're competing, and so it is, you're if you look like a tourist and you look like you don't know what you're doing, you don't know where you're going, you just scream, I'm a mark. Like you can walk, but I mean, basic things, walk quickly, like where you know
Hmm.
where you're going. And the person who's going to pickpocket you goes, that's not the mark. They,
Yeah.
they probably also know who to call. So I'm
Yeah.
going to go to the person
Yeah.
who doesn't. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
well,
And
head
and
on a
on that
swivel and
topic,
walk.
one of the hints from the book, and this I found out by accident. This wasn't even initially from an interview. It's something I observed and then asked one of my experts on women's self-defense. So my wife and I were going to a concert in one of those neighborhoods that's not always savory. Ended up parking about 7 blocks away, and we're walking. And we're about halfway there when we notice there's a young woman, probably late 20s, maybe early 30s, and she's wearing business casual clothes. It's clear she was just late getting out of work. And I noticed her speed up until she's about 10 feet behind us, 7 feet behind us, and then slow down and stay with us.
Hmm.
She's not close enough to sketch us out, but she's close enough that a casual observer might think she's with the middle-aged jock and
Right.
his wife who walks like she grew up in a major city.
Yeah.
And I was like, that woman's drafting off of us.
Yep.
And then I
Smart.
reached out to Teja Van Wicklen, who's one of the best women self-defense people out there operating and said, "Hey, is this a thing?" And her response was, "Yes, that is absolutely a thing. I'm a little surprised you noticed. I'm
Yeah.
also a lot surprised that you, of all people, didn't already know about it."
Right, right.
But
But
that's
no,
a
I mean
very
that's
simple trick you can use if you're by
yeah.
yourself, especially if you're a woman or a younger, a teenager who's a little worried about where they are.
Yeah.
You find a group of people that aren't out to victimize them. Like if you're a 22-year-old woman who's lost her pack in the evening, maybe don't go draft off of the four drunk 22-year-old men.
Right. Yes.
But
Choose the
you
right
find
pack. But yeah, find a
and
couple
then just
and wander with them.
yeah. But here we are talking about crime prevention because it's sexy and interesting.
Right.
But the book's got 100 tips, and only 10 of them are even remotely related to crime prevention.
Yeah.
You know, because
How
it's
to
all
how to
these
keep
other
your house from burning down. Like there,
yeah,
these are the things that are like own a
yeah,
fire extinguisher.
yeah,
Like.
and practice with your fire extinguisher.
Yes. If you've never used it, you'll use it like you've never used it before.
Yeah,
What was the, I love your line about, we don't rise to our level of what is it,
we
expectation.
don't rise to the occasion; we fall to our level of training.
Yep. So train with the fire extinguisher, train to
Yeah,
get out of your house, train your
mhm,
kids to know who to call. Like, these
yeah,
are, those are
all
things that
these
are
little
far more
things.
practical than training your kid to run away from strangers.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, exactly.
yeah,
You give them those skills, and also when you talk to your kids about these skills, the thing is that if they're old enough to understand the conversation you're about to have with them, they are old enough to have already been exposed to the risk you're trying to beat. So this idea that you're going to scare them
yeah,
is just not the case because
yeah.
they've already thought about it. They've already seen the TV show. They've already seen the TikTok video. So by sitting down with them and talk to them, number one, you empower them by giving them a plan, and number two, you show them that mom and dad are on top of this,
Yeah.
and you can just hang out and be a kid for a little while longer.
Which gives them power and safety, like security. Like,
Exactly.
okay, I have a role in this. I know how to leave the house or whatever. But also you've thought of it too, because you're right. It's disconcerting to think, hey, I've started to worry about this, but mom and dad have never talked to me about it. Maybe they
Yeah.
haven't. That's don't put your kid in that space. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Kids from a very young age, what they're asking more than anything else is who's the grown up in this room?
Yep.
And
Am I
if we
safe?
don't reassure them that it's us,
Yeah. My
they
son,
know they're not qualified.
yeah. My son, before he went to bed when he was, 3,
Mhm,
4 years old, every night would say, "What's the plan tomorrow?" And we just
mhm,
learned this was his way of feeling safe. Like, okay,
mhm.
I know what tomorrow will hold. And he wasn't
Yeah.
like, like if that plan, if we deviate from that plan, it's the end of the world. But he just wanted to know there is a plan for
Yeah.
tomorrow. And it just became part of his routine.
Yeah.
And so it became like a nice way for us to kind of touch base, and go, okay, what is the plan for tomorrow? But we'd go through as we were putting him to
Yeah.
sleep. Okay, this is, we'd do our book reading and then we'd go, okay, this is what you can expect out of the day tomorrow. Okay, good. Then
And
I'm
mom's
fine.
over in the
I can go to
corner with her
sleep.
calendar taking notes.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes.
You didn't tell
But
me about that.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, seriously, that would happen. I'd
Yeah.
go, oh, but I do
Yeah.
have this thing. Wait, you do? Okay, I
Yeah.
get, I was unaware of that. But yeah, I mean, it's really
Yeah.
helpful to just provide that security.
Yeah.
That is a kind of safety
Yeah.
that I think people take for granted. That emotional safety. Are you making the people in your life, especially your children, feel confident and like
Yeah.
the world is, which is I want to validate that is challenging now in some ways. Like it
Yeah.
is reasonable for adults to be going, the world seems to be on fire and it's out of control, but your kids need to know you're on top of it, and like yeah,
Like my youngest is now 15 and he's old enough to be reading the news and talking with his friends and we've had some very frank conversations about so what are we going to do if this happens? I say, well,
yeah,
here's what we're going to do,
yeah.
and just being able to have that conversation
Well,
is
and I
really
understand there are things, like global climate change, where you
yeah,
go, what are we going to do? I don't have an easy answer for you, but I can tell you it's not happening tomorrow. And
yeah,
even that because I think kids go, I have seen
mhm,
the ocean's going to rise by 10 feet. Like, yep, but that's going to be in inches.
yeah,
So it's good that you're thinking about that, and we don't want that to
mhm,
happen. But also, you
yeah.
don't have. It's not. The dramatic version is what was the movie? It wasn't Day After Tomorrow. It's called something like that. But
The day
it's
after, the morning after, the day after, the
something, yeah,
new
where it
one.
was like everything goes
Yeah,
wrong at once. which
Yeah.
is, yes, it's very scary. That's not the way
Mhm.
it's incremental. And I think we see that in, a lot of
Yeah.
the political situations that I talk a lot about on this show too, is it's incremental and people go, oh, okay, one judge was arrested in Wisconsin. This is
Mhm.
bad, but it's not the end of the world. Yeah, but it's incremental. Like
Yeah.
these things are step. Now a mayor's been arrested. Okay, this, would not have happened before, but it becomes the new normal. And so letting folks know, hey, I'm keeping an eye on that. Uh,
And
you
also
know,
you can look for some of the incremental fixes or incremental solutions.
yes,
For example, you're talking about global warming, which can be an issue eventually, but right now we're experiencing that issue in heavy weather
yes,
and in wildfires. And so having to sit down, okay, so here's our boogie bag.
yeah,
You'll notice that it bears a close resemblance to our camping gear because it's the same stuff.
yeah,
That lives in the trunk of the car, and as you know, we always fill our car up as soon as we get to half.
yeah.
So we'll always have at least a half a tank of gas and our camping gear, so that if we have to evacuate the house for heavy weather reasons, we can get all the way to my brother's house in Seattle.
Yeah. I always
Um,
grab too one of those like case of bottled water.
yeah,
Because it's great for you need water. Your
mhm,
car could just run out of water. It might not be
yeah,
a natural disaster. You just need water in your car.
yeah,
So having, and the same thing. Okay, now this is half empty because we're grabbing bottles of water from it.
yeah,
Okay, we need to get more water. But,
exactly.
just, basic, some of the stuff that sounds prepper is like, no, if the Juan de Fuca plate goes and there's a big earthquake and the bridge in Independence goes out, they're not going to put food in the grocery store for a week
Yeah,
or a week and a half. So having canned goods doesn't have to be, I don't need the rapture worth of food. I need
no.
weeks, a
Yeah, two or
week,
three
2 weeks.
weeks. I
Yeah.
think FEMA just escalated their recommendation to 4 weeks.
Oh, really?
And but even that, you talk about preppers, and the way I view prepping is kind of like in the martial art of Taekwondo, they have these really cool kicks square to the head. But if you're actually a tactical individual who's balanced or something, you know that it's a bad idea to kick someone in the head.
Because you're
And
real
that exposes
exposed.
you. You're all exposed, and also you're probably gonna lose your balance on the surface
Yeah.
you get fights in because somebody puked on that alley 10 minutes ago.
Right.
But Taekwondo students know that they practice delivering just if you can break two boards at head level, you can absolutely destroy somebody's kneecap.
Yeah.
And the same thing, if you are prepared for a 4 week cessation of services, you are absolutely fine with a 3 day blackout or
Yeah.
a week and a half long snowstorm or for your car to break down on the way home. You've got
Well,
that handled.
we just had an experience here where,
Mhm.
my house in the United States,
Yeah.
very prepared, right? Moved to
Yeah.
another country, we didn't get any candles. And we
Oh.
had a power outage, and luckily the power outage did not last long, but it was a heads up. Like,
Mhm.
oh, we used to be prepared. We are no longer prepared. What do we need to do? So, it's acquiring those
Yeah.
those few things. I mean, candles cost a euro. Like, we
Yeah.
should have candles in the house. So it's the basics. But yeah, you're right. The more prepared you get, the
Mhm.
better off you will be when it is less than that.
Yeah.
So
And again, we can involve our kids in some of that preparation. Like
yeah,
if the 7-year-old knows where you keep the flashlights,
right.
and because you've been sending him there to get them every time you have to change a light bulb, every time you have to
Mhm.
find something you dropped under the car, all of those things, then power goes out. And that could be scary and disconcerting. They're wondering, what the hell am I going to do? And then you say, hey, go get the flashlights and know you know where they are.
Yeah,
And then they are contributing meaningfully. They know what to do next. They're proud of themselves. They're helping. They're involved. They're
yeah,
engaged. But all of this is, again, this is stuff that you do ahead of time. You think about it. You have your family meetings. You develop your plan. You acquire your supplies. I had a similar experience to you. The last time I was on the show, we talked about how I took the family to Crete for a year.
yeah.
So we have a prepared household as well. So here I am with 3 check bags, 3 carry-ons, and three
Yep.
personal items. All right, so the first aid kit weighs what? Am I really going to need how much Coban wrap am I really going to need in a year?
Right.
Right.
My
Um,
first aid kit is still, I'm grabbing it right now. My backpack
yep.
is right next to me because I'm
Mhm.
walking around the city and the stuff you
Yeah.
need in a first aid kit, like
Mhm.
literally talk to your doctor, like, or read Jason's book, somebody who has talked to actual professionals, because I was talking to a doctor who was like, super glue, one of the most important things in
Yeah.
your first aid kit, those little tiny tubs of super glue, the little tubes go a long way. And I was on one of these trips here to Europe, and some kid got a cut on their leg. It wasn't, the end of the world, but it was bleeding significantly. Super glue took
Yep.
care of it. We didn't have to worry about
Yeah.
which kind of fancy Band-Aid. The doctor was like, nope, super glue it.
Yeah.
It totally worked.
I know. Exactly. Exactly. And that's one of the things that I really appreciated about the journey of getting this book together, which is just I'm talking to experts.
Yeah.
And these guys, every professional I've ever met who does their job well knows one or two things that are why they can do it as a professional. And so many of them were so sharing with them. Like one of my favorites came from a bodyguard one of the reasons that I really trust his point of view, he's got a great book. His name's Nick Hughes. His book is How to Be Your Own Bodyguard. And the original cover was really cringily cheesy, but it
Mm,
has some of the best information. But his approach is yes, again. So there's the protecting people from violence, but there's also, hey, your client wants to go on a desert hike. How much water are you taking?
yeah.
All right. And his one of his little hacks that I've implemented, it has helped me one time on the way back from the beach, is it's so simple, but it never would have occurred to me in a million years. The next time you buy a new pair of sneakers or a new pair of hiking boots, whichever you like, the old ones go in your trunk.
Mm,
That way, if you're stuck in flip flops after a beach or you're driving home
yeah.
on date night, your wife can walk to the gas station in something other than stilettos. You've
Yeah.
got broken in
Yeah.
good footwear in the car at all times. So no matter what you had on your feet when you set out, you can make the hike to help.
Yep. That's a
It's
good
just
call.
little
Those
things
were
like that.
new shoes were one of the first things we bought when we came because we
Yeah.
came in, the clothes on our backs, the shoes on our
Yeah.
feet, right? And then
Mhm.
we were like, okay, well, bringing a bunch of shoes would have been expensive,
Yeah.
heavy, right? Well, once we got here, the amount we walk on a day-to-day
Yeah.
basis, everybody in the household basically found out my shoes are not up for this kind of walking. But you're
Yeah.
right, we all kept the old shoes because you don't know you're going to need them. Like, and so
Yeah.
yeah, that's a good piece of advice.
And so that's just the kind of little things. Another one, this one's not in the book because it's not really in the scope of this book, but it will be one of the follow-ups. Uh, I don't just talk to people about parenting. One
Right.
of my guests is a dog trainer to help talk about how to keep our dogs safe. This one I'm about to mention comes from a woman who spent her career in admissions and sales for retirement homes. So wanted to talk to her about, okay, so how do we talk to a parent if they might not agree that they're not safe alone? And how do we make sure they're in the right
Yeah.
community? And again, these are little tips that never would have occurred to us. She mentioned that, you can't trust the sales staff.
No.
You can't trust the other staff most of the time. If you go to somebody in the government watchdog groups, they are severely bound by what they can say and can't say. So you're not going to get a straight answer out of them. But what you do is you go to the nearest hospital and you talk to a couple ambulance drivers and you talk to an ER nurse
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah.
because they absolutely know what is
Which
going
one
on.
is the one where
Because
there's the slip and falls all the
yeah,
time? And yeah,
or the gangrenous bed
right.
sores from
Bed
negligence,
sores because
or
the people are not being cared for well.
yeah. So
Yeah.
they know and they do not care
Yeah.
about
They've
about
got no skin
the
in the game. In
restrictions other
fact,
people
they
have.
they have an incentive to tell you the truth. Put your
Yeah,
parent in the one that's going to take better care of them so they're not on my plate every day.
yeah, and a lot of them are angry about it when they see the ones that are
Hmm.
neglectful. But that's just another little thing that this professional understood that I it never would have occurred to me in a million
Right.
years.
That's really thoughtful. I mean, think through the incentive structure, right?
Yeah,
Who's going to tell you the truth? The sales staff is going to tell you their place is the best, always.
yeah,
I mean, I ran into a lesser variation on this. I won't, you know, out anybody, but when you're looking at universities, the
yeah,
last place to trust is the university. Every university
mhm,
is going to tell you it is the best. and they're going to tell you ours is the most respected in the profession you want to go into. Well, and so that process of, kind of interviewing shouldn't be with the universities. It should be with people in the profession. What are they actually going to say? Oh, when that university's name comes across on a resume, I actually, raise an eyebrow. That's the one you want to be at. But,
I'm actually putting together a product. I'm releasing it in 2 weeks for. I haven't figured out yet whether this product is going to help people who are going to college be safer, or whether it's going to help parents of those people freak out less.
Feel safer, yes.
But one of the points in that is exactly what you're talking about. The campus people are not going to tell you the truth. Campus security probably won't tell you the truth.
And might not know. Like if you work in campus security, you work on one campus, right? You don't have a base of comparison.
Exactly. But if you have the time, you go in without your child. You find a couple of bars near campus, preferably in the summer. You find the oldest bartender and you sit down and you tip him and you ask him what's what.
Yeah.
Or her. It's usually him, but it's you ask them what's what.
Yeah, well, especially if it's in a multi-university town where you can, and they can say, "Oh, you're thinking about sending your kid to that school? I wouldn't." Whereas the kids who come from this school, no problem for me here in this bar. Yeah,
or if it's a one university town, you can get the lay of the land about, okay, what's really like, are people getting their bikes stolen, or are they getting their heads bashed in?
Right.
How often do you have to rescue a girl from the drink she left unattended here?
Yeah.
All those things. And that's, because the bartenders usually not during the school year, because that's usually the bartenders are students and they're there for like three.
Yeah, they've got tops. Yeah, they've got 2 years of experience in that town. No, that's a really good call. You find that old bartender who knows, because they've heard the stories, right? They've heard it from the people they're working with, but they've heard it for years.
They've been there for years. They have a different attitude. So, you can usually find that person. Which reminds me of a book I can recommend. It's called What They Don't Teach Teens. It's by a lawyer named Don Cristal, I think. I just finished it. I'm interviewing him for my show later this month. But it's just all great information for teens about how not to get shot by the cops, how to navigate sextortion, all these kinds of things. But one of his points, kind of his opening paragraph or chapter, is about find your adult.
Yeah.
If you're lucky, it's going to be one of your parents or both. If you're unlucky, find your adult. That might be your chess coach. It might be your best friend's dad. It might be your little sister's best friend's mom.
It's often one of your high school teachers.
Yeah.
Where they, the kid who was in my room every day at lunch. And I was like, this kid is super annoying to me. They're driving me nuts. I want to go eat with the grown-ups, but this kid needs me. Like I am this kid's safe place. And find the person.
Find your adult, the person you can ask. And then as adults going out in the world, find the adult in that room. You find the ER tech for asking about retirement homes. You find the old bartender who's been there for 20 years when you're looking at campus security. You find whatever situation is. When you're traveling, you find the expat forum. Yeah. Right. And
I will say, and this goes with the expat forum idea too, but for kids out there, if you are finding the teacher, the counselor, the pastor, whoever that person is, find the one who connects you to others. Because if you find an adult who isolates you, that person is not safe. If you find an adult who's saying, hey, you coming into my room every day for lunch, there's a counselor you should be talking to also. Or the pastor who's connecting you with another adult, that's a really safe person. And I think a lot of kids are going, but I want to know you're not just ditching me. No, the fact that they are connecting you with other adults is a really good sign.
Absolutely. That's a huge and subtle piece on identifying abusive relationships, whether you're a child or whether you're an adult who's dating. Yeah. There's actually a chapter on several of those signs in the book. Another of those tips that I got from somebody who analyzes this professionally is, if you're going on a first date, and this is, women have to worry about domestic abuse more than men do, but it's a good idea for men too. On that first date, you set an arbitrary boundary. I'd love to meet you for coffee. I'd love to have dinner with you, but I have a hard out at 7. Or, you know what? I don't want pizza. Or anything. It's arbitrary, and if it goes well, you can drop it later. But you watch to see how they respond to the boundary.
Yeah.
And if they
It's a
push it
good,
or mock it or try to discount it on the first date when ostensibly everybody's going to be on their best behavior,
they're
that
telling
is
you a
a
lot about
huge red
themselves.
flag that this a
Yeah.
relationship with this person is dangerous.
That's really good advice. Yeah. Just,
Yeah.
come up with a no, design a no in advance.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can go to the movies. I don't like the following kind of movies. And
Yeah.
listen to and if that person says, but you need to see this movie, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And you have to account a little bit for nerdiness or enthusiasm,
Right,
right?
right.
But
There's
you
I'm
can
really excited
tell.
about this movie, but if it's no, before I've even known you, you must do the following. You must have pizza. You must, that's
Yeah.
a big red flag.
Yeah. And
Yeah, that's
it's
that's a that's a that is a good way to test that. Is
yeah,
this
it's just a
person?
little tiny thing, but it's can make a very big difference. And that's basically what the book was. I'm not a smart man. I'm a man who listens to smart men and remember and women and remembers what they told me.
Yeah.
And that's what the book is. It's the stuff I was able to hear and then test and observe in my own experience as a parent who, taken, and we try to be a little wild and woolly. We go places, we take risks, we take chances. So we test some of these that work, some of them that
Yeah.
don't. Somewhere I thought I knew how it worked and then found out it don't work like that. And I needed to make some adjustments. Uh, yeah, we were in Rome last year, and my son fell for one of those. They hand you something they pretend is a gift, and then try to
This
charge you
a
money
guy tried
tricks.
to do this to me literally today, and it was so funny
Yeah,
because Crystal, we're sitting there at this place, and she's like, "You guys have made me so paranoid about that." But it's because that person tries to hand you something.
yeah,
Do not take it because I have had that bad experience where then the person goes, "You have to give me money." I mean, it's this classic scam,
yeah.
and then it's
My son's
threatening
was
to go to
even
the
worse
police.
because the guy offered him a fist bump,
Mm.
and in the middle of the fist bump, he transferred a bracelet onto my son's wrist
Yes,
and tightened it.
it's very
Like,
slick.
and he's like, "I want 50
Yeah,
euro for it. Hey, here's €5."
yeah,
Because I'll spend €5 just for the story later.
right. But I
Right?
mean, we
But
literally had to. I had to, in returning them, I was dealing with a teenager
yeah,
who got ripped off, and
yeah,
the guy took 20, and the guy was like, no, 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 you have to keep this thing, and I was like, I'm literally going to drop this on the ground, like,
mm,
because the person will
yeah,
not take it back because it's the
yeah,
evidence, and so
yeah,
it's okay. I am setting this in front of you. I am not accepting that, but yeah, if you can, anything you can do to not take it. But
mm,
yeah, that's just one of those things. If you have not been exposed to that scam, you don't know.
yeah.
But yeah, it's a way people make a living here. How
Mm,
many bracelets do you have to hand out and charge people at 20 euros an hour
yeah,
to be making a pretty decent living ripping
yeah.
people off. So
And in a travel safety situation, I think I might have mentioned this the last time we talked. Also, keeping in mind, it's not so true in Barcelona, for example. It's a very affluent city, but when you're in Siem Reap, Cambodia, or you're in Casablanca in Morocco, the scam that they're pulling is a day's wage for them, and it's like $5.
yeah, yeah.
It's a trivial amount of money to a North American who can afford to travel to those destinations.
Well, and I then ended up in a conversation
Yeah.
with our tour guide who was saying,
Yeah.
rather than confront the person and get the
Hmm.
money back for the person, you have to bear in mind the risk. Like,
Yeah.
you've now made this person angry. If you're, the kid gets
Hmm.
knifed later over 20
Yeah.
euros, it was worth it
That's
to walk
yeah.
away. And one of the things I've really, Crystal and I were talking about this today as we were wandering, bringing the dogs home from the dog park. We came across the police dealing with somebody who's clearly having a mental health crisis.
Mm.
And I have been so impressed by the police in Barcelona because they are hyper focused on de-escalation. Part of it is when they're going out, it's almost always cross-gender groups. It's not,
Mm.
five big burly men. It's two men, two women. They
Mm.
are, and rather than, I never hear them shouting. They never
Mm.
shout. They're never like, you have to do the following. I need to make sure you're obeying me. They're like,
Mm.
if you're not, if you're clearly having a time, I'll literally stand here. And so it looks to an outsider like these cops are getting paid by the hour.
Mhm.
But they're doing their job and doing it really
Yeah.
well because in every turn they're de-escalating and they're calling in some medical professional rather than making this a fight. And
Yeah.
these folks did a really good job of kind of cordoning this person off with their body without it being aggressive in any way. And so we were able to just go around and kind of also protecting his decency and privacy and
Yeah.
dignity while he kind of had his crisis, and not making it a thing. And we were talking about all the stories we'd heard in the States in the last week of,
Yeah.
abuses of power, where people, the people in power were going, I need to prove that I'm in charge in this situation rather than de-escalation. And I know you talk extensively about de-escalation techniques in the book.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Because that's not just talking a mugger into leaving you alone. That's maintaining your relationship with your teenager. That's keeping a serene and happy marriage.
Yeah.
That's those are important skills as well. And I was lucky enough to actually talk to some of the guys from, and actually it was both guys this time from the Verbal Judo Institute. And
I've
yeah,
heard
and
of
Mark
this.
McYoung, huh?
I have heard, I saw a video about verbal judo just yesterday where there was this
Uh,
old instructor and he's talking to a bunch of really, really like tough, like at
yeah,
a martial arts school. And I mean, watching him do the verbal judo where he's like, okay,
yeah,
try and start a fight with me verbally. And then at
yeah.
everyone, he turned it around to where the person was like, I'm laughing and you're my friend. And I was like,
It's like,
this is brilliant,
yeah. He's like, "What you looking at? Your
Yeah.
shirt, man. Where'd you get that shirt?
It was exactly
That's
that.
a
It was,
great shirt."
yeah, I really like that
You know?
haircut. And the person's
Yeah,
like, oh, I don't know how to be mad at you about that.
yeah.
Yeah,
One topic from verbal judo, because it is that kind of technique to kind of derail the conversation, and I talk about this in the book because it's really useful in a lot of situations with your interpersonal relationships.
yeah,
So we all have friends who can vent, right?
yeah.
We also have friends that they can't vent. Every word that comes out of their mouth about something they're angry about just makes them angrier and angrier and angrier. And what they need to do is shut up for 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Some of us may have been married to someone like that at one time or another. Uh, uh, but if you tell them to shut up for 2 minutes,
You've made
that's
it
the end of the world.
worse. Yeah, you cannot
Yeah.
do that. That's not a solution. It's
And
like telling
oh,
somebody who is in a panic that they should not panic.
yes, hey,
It's the
calm
worst
down.
thing to say.
How often is calm down actually calmed anybody
Exactly.
down? And every teenager goes through a period where they're
Mhm.
that person. So this is a magic word that fixes that. You can everybody here knows somebody this is about. You can just take us home. You just look at me. I say, hey, hold on a sec. Let me make sure I understand what you just told me.
Yeah.
And then with a calmer me, you say, okay, so what I think you're telling me is this. Have I got that right?
Because they can't
And you take
possibly say,
about
no, you don't get to understand me. They're going to
yeah, because
say,
everybody
okay,
wants to feel listened to. They
right.
want to hear their own words come out of somebody else's mouth. That's the
Yeah.
dream.
Yeah.
And so you say that, say, hey, hold just a second. I need to make sure I understand what you just told me. I'm not sure I've got it right. And then you tell them, and you take 2 minutes to tell them.
Yeah.
And then what that does is they stop that upper spiral thing.
Yeah.
It also, because you're asking them to listen and analyze what you're saying, it steps them out of their emotional process and into their analytical process. And they feel listened to and heard. And even if you got it wrong, they feel important. They feel you're telling them that they're important enough to you that you want to make sure you get this right, even if you understood it completely.
Right. Well, and the power dynamic is
Yeah.
very healthy there because you're not saying I know better than you. You're saying,
Mhm.
wait, I'm the one who is not understanding. You
Yeah.
are the one who understands. Can I, can you walk me through this? Because I want to understand this. And so it doesn't put the person on the defensive. Like,
Yeah.
like you're not saying, hey, I have the answers for you. Like, I
Exactly.
like that. Let me
So you can look that stuff up online. It's great. Actually, I'm really excited. The Verbal Judo Institute has hired me to write their next book.
Oh,
So,
cool.
yeah, so I'm
Yeah.
learning all kinds of crazy stuff. But that one, yeah, that's the hey, what you looking at? Your shirt, man. That's the best shirt.
Yep.
Or you know,
Yep. Oh, okay. So
or
how can the person then go, I'm really mad that you like my shirt?
yeah, or why are you looking at my girlfriend? Hey, did you go to Central Valley High School?
Yeah.
Is your name Karen?
Yeah.
Probably don't use Karen right now because of
Yeah.
whatever,
Yeah.
right? But is right? Just little
Yeah.
things
And
like
then,
that just
oh no,
derails the
that's not my
thing.
name. Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking. Yeah. And then
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's learning those tricks to go, this, you clearly are the one who is upset, and I'm not going to point out that you are upset because that doesn't help anybody. I'm going to say something that takes that away. There's no way to be upset at that, you know?
Yeah. Back in the day before I had kids, I had a favorite bar in my neighborhood, and they never employed bouncers. And but I don't know, once every 2 months there'd be a fight that I break up, and I always had the same line. I'd say, "Hey man, come on here with me. Who the fuck
Yeah,
are you? I'm the guy buying you a beer who's funnier than that guy."
yeah.
And
And
it
then,
worked
yeah.
more than
Well,
half the
oh,
time.
wait. Well, I'm going to be angry at you for that. Like, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, and so yeah, that's a good one to put in the next book. Like, that's good verbal judo. Like, you know.
You know, but
So
that's yeah, non sequiturs
yeah,
are huge. One of my mentors in bouncing was like, you can't reason with drunks, but you can confuse them.
yeah, yeah, yep. I've
And
seen it.
anytime you say drunk, parents, you can substitute child.
Mm.
They are tiny drunk adults.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's a good way to think about it. Like, this is, you know, the person who's developing their reasoning skills. They have
Yeah,
not, you know, and we all as adults have times when we are not reasoning well. But yes,
yeah,
presume that the child can't reason. Yeah, I took a class with a brilliant psych professor at university who was saying many of the cases, he said the majority of the cases of child abuse he saw were the consequence of adults not understanding the children are children
yeah,
and thinking, oh, this kid filled their diaper at an inconvenient time for me. They did it volitionally. I'm now going to punish them or whatever. You know, not recognizing a child is a child,
yeah,
not an adult. And you know, and then being able to control yourself, because we all as parents have moments where we're agitated. You know, being parent is hard, but being able to go,
yeah.
this is not my child is
I'm not
not
going to take this
trying to,
personally.
you know,
Yeah,
harm me. They're being a kid.
yeah.
Like,
And that tiny drunken adult thing has really helped me as a parent with my
yeah.
patients because that kid's being an idiot.
Yep.
Or that teenager is saying some foul stuff to me. But I'm going to take that as personally as I did at the bachelor party when the one friend of my brother's told me exactly what he thought of my favorite sports team.
Right.
It's identical.
Yeah.
Um,
Tiny
yeah,
drunken adults. That's
yeah.
great. Hey, readers and reviewers. I want to put out an all call for guests who are fighting back against fascism. If you know an author or artist of any kind who is using their art or their platform to push back, especially if they are doing so in an interesting way that deserves more attention and support, share this show with them and encourage them to email NotAPipePublishing at NotAPipePublishing@gmail.com, and we'll get them scheduled. And if you're looking for inspiring or practical ways you can push back, be sure to subscribe to the show so you catch all the great guests folks are going to recommend. See you here each week. Fascist purges always begin with books. If you can't imagine a better future, you'll never fight for one.
At a time when oligarchs and politicians are trying to divide us, to scare us, to silence us, it's more important than ever to speak up, even when it sometimes feels like screaming into the void.
Celebrations of established foundations all of a sudden screeching, discordant, as the preachers become ignored by the God they adore, pathetic and
anti-fascist
grasping,
literature is
and the
one way
mumbling
we
their
fight back
lasting
against the rising tide of hatred and ignorance that seeks to drown the sparks of empathy, community, and curiosity that are the birthright of all human beings.
And then maybe you understand. Never let them silence your voice. Never let them push you down. And never forget that your mommy loves you.
Through our stories and poems, we articulate our love for each other, our desire for justice, our need for freedom, and our determination to make a stand.
The seductive depths of the ocean are more appealing than physical contact with either of them. A mental stream of David Attenborough narration carries her through the awkwardness. Here, the larger of the two apex
Volume 1,
predators
the Antifa Lit Journal, begins with Rachel A. Rosen's brilliant "What If We Kissed While Sinking a Billionaire's Yacht?" and takes the reader on a journey through rage, fear, and despair to a place of grace, hope, and motivation.
Fascists are like bindweed and blackberry in the garden. You can't eradicate them, but if you stay on top of your reading, you can keep them from taking over.
By itself, it's not enough, but no single effort is. We must come together and embrace one another.
Media. The Enriquez kids came to my daycare until their dad got disappeared, Dolores said. Where were the signs and the singing when my brother died?
Protest. Boycott. Strike. Demand your representatives do more. Protect the vulnerable. And support the people who are fighting alongside you through their art.
The kind who sits comfortably where evil meets idiocy and drinks up what he's fed through tubes painted red like the doors of those they tell us are better off dead.
Back our Kickstarter and help us make the Antifa Lit Journal into the kind of community that will outlast the current fascist regime. Fight fascism with your voice while you still can.
You deserve a vacation.
How about a trip to a dude ranch on a colony planet?
Or a journey to a universe where wizards call lightning down from the sky and calm rumbling volcanoes?
Or a holiday tour of the major cities of Europe with vampires and werewolves and witches as guides.
Or maybe just a nice hot sudsy bath with a book of poetry that will make you cry and sigh and laugh.
We've got you covered.
A paperback will appear on your doorstep each month to whisk you away, and you'll return refreshed, enlightened, and ready to make the world we share a brighter place for everyone.
Or if you prefer, you can sign up for a quarterly subscription and get 4 YA titles, 4 adult titles, or 4 collections of poetry per year.
Plus, you'll get book club questions from the author before you start the book, and an interview with the author afterwards.
So, if you are in a book group or want to start one, this is everything you need in a kit. Will we occasionally throw in some extra surprises just to say thank you to our members? Of course.
You can also give someone their very own membership with all of the rights and privileges pertaining thereto.
So, find a reward level that's right for you. And share this with your friends.
Join the Indulge Your Shelf Book Club today. Your bookshelves deserve a little pampering.
Yeah.
So I did want to ask you before we, I want to make sure we have time for this because you have done a ton of work in the run up to this launch. And so, and in the launch, and I think authors out there would find this fascinating. So what all have you been doing to get the word out about this book?
Oh man. So I've got kind of a playbook because this is my first book through a major publisher. No pun.
No offense. No, we're very small. Not a pipe.
It's
very,
not
very
big
small.
five.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not big five, but it's like the next tier down.
Yeah.
And it oddly feels constipated because I've self-published a lot of books, which means I can check my sales figures anytime I want. You're very, very. If I ask you for sales figures, I have them. I have no idea. I don't have that password.
That's interesting.
I don't know how the sales
I had not thought
doing.
of that. You don't get that. On the other hand, you're not refreshing, which is good.
Well, I am on the indicators that I do have, like sales rank and number of reviews and number of downloads over on Edelweiss. So I'm gerbil buttoning those.
Yeah.
But I still don't know how many books I've sold. But so I have a playbook, and I worked the playbook this time with the help of a marketing team, which was nice.
And that's something that I've worked with a marketing team once. One of our authors hired a very expensive firm, and a lot of what we learned is a lot of the stuff they do is the legwork. And this is not to diminish what they do. It's the stuff that authors don't want to do, but authors could do. Like they send the press releases, and they reach out to the podcasts, and all that stuff. But so what have they offered that has been kind of eye-opening?
So mostly they're managing ad spend. They're doing an actual ad spend. They got me a review in so there's Kirkus, and there's the one that starts with the B, the books, the book list. They got me a book list review. They're managing like nominations for awards.
Yeah.
They provided me with a budget for Amazon coupons so we can get a stack of verified purchase reviews. And I had access to the Rolodex in terms of getting podcast appearances.
And that's huge.
Yeah. Now, my own self, I set a goal of appearing on 50 podcasts about this book. And so I got a list of 200 podcasts. And I talked to each and every one of them. And a week later, I checked in with them. And a week after that, I checked in with them again. I'm at, I think I'm at like 45, 46 right now. And I'm going to get those last 3.
Yeah.
But that was systematic, nose to the grindstone.
Yeah.
Fire up a TV I've already seen before over there on Netflix and let that run in the background while I'm copy paste, copy paste, copy paste, copy paste.
Right.
What was really funny was one of them is I approached a women's health and safety podcast that weren't interested in what I had to say. Never heard back from them. And accidentally copied the email I'd written for them to a different podcast. But this guy just had a couple of daughters. He's like, I want to talk about women's safety and self-defense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it just happened out.
Yeah.
Ideally, I would have
great.
tailored it to him better, but yeah, and it was just make a list of 200, reach out.
Well, and this, I hope authors out there are hearing this.
Yeah.
The same skill you developed in querying is a marketing skill. It's just keep sending the emails, right? Yeah. And I understand that you don't enjoy this part of the job. Nobody enjoys this part of the job, but remember, you didn't enjoy querying either. It's the same, you just gotta do it kind of thing. But I like that idea of setting a goal for, this many podcasts. Getting interviews, getting reviews in newspapers, sometimes those things are just kind of out of your power. But things like podcasts, or if you're, a book talk on TikTok, bloggers, whatever's your kind of channel, plugging away at reaching out to as many as possible. That is something you don't have power over in the same way you can't make the yes, but you have power over how many you send out.
And if you know your general response rate, because I have a podcast and I have a lot of podcast appearances, so I have a decent resume on that. I knew that I'd get 1 in 4. And so 200. Yeah. I did a similar thing with blogs. Did not get as much response on that. We're going to see. I'm going to do a second round, see if that works. The other thing, and there's a couple of pieces of advice I give at writers' conferences where I speak, because I write for a living, and a lot of folks want to do that. One thing is to keep in mind that when you're querying, when you're asking a podcast to have you on, when you are proposing a guest post, you are committing non-solicited promotional mail. Yeah. You are sending junk mail to somebody. If you get a 2% success rate with junk mail, you can quit your day job and teach people how to do junk mail.
Right.
So when you've sent 15 queries and not hit anything yet, that does not mean failure.
Right.
When you've done 200 and only heard back from 2 people, maybe, right? And so the scale at which we need to approach and make the ask is much larger than I think a lot of authors are prepared for.
Yeah. Well, another piece of advice that was given to me by a previous guest on the show is when you are engaging in any kind of, that kind of interaction, which really is sales, right? You want to be saying, this is what I'm here to offer you.
Yeah.
And so often we're saying, would you please have me on the podcast? It would be helpful to me. Yeah. Would you please publish my book? That would really help me. Would you please, and it needs to be, hey, this is what I have to offer your podcast. This is what I, as an author, have to offer your readers. This is why this book is going to sell, right? Everything is, this is what I'm doing for you. And you'll have a lot more success if you've thought that through, which is, again, this goes back to your writing. Like, when you are writing the book, you should be thinking, how will this be enjoyable and beneficial or terrifying or whatever for the reader? Not, the reader will really do me a favor if they buy my book. And so taking that same mentality that we take in the writing process of caring about the reader into our marketing. Like, how do I bring something? And it's great for this one because you're talking about incredibly valuable skills, and so you're able to bring that.
This one is a really easy to sell to parenting podcasts, safety podcasts, martial arts podcasts. And that brings to the other thing that I think a lot of authors miss the opportunity on. I recommend go to 2 conferences a year minimum. One of them is a writers' conference, so you can hang out with writers. The other is a conference that focuses on the subject that you write about. If you're writing fantasy fiction, go to WorldCon.
Yeah.
If you write family safety stuff, I go to 3 or 4 large organization meetings for martial arts organizations. So because of that, because I laid that groundwork last year, I went to, I think, 4. On launch week, I had photos from all over the country of people holding my book and snapping the picture on Facebook because I'd gone there and been, sales gets a bad rap, right? Because we're always thinking of the guy who's slapping the hood of the car, but not too hard because lest the wheels fall off.
Right.
And trying to bone you. But real sales, good sales, the kind that we should do is we're just so passionate and excited and nerdy about the thing we're writing about that we're contagious.
Yeah. Well, and part of what I think is so important about that, if you're writing fiction, is it is very easy if you are writing fiction to go, this is what I like to read, and lose touch with, but what do other people like to read? And when you're getting into those cons, you're finding out, oh, romantasy is all the rage right now. Well, that's not far from what I do. Like, I enjoy that too. I can easily, not change what I do too dramatically. I'm not going to write, I'm not going to go, oh, this is the trend, and so I'm going to write to the trend. I don't recommend that to anybody. But when you're in that milieu where you're going, oh, this is what readers enjoy, well, I work for readers. What can I provide them? And so it will really help.
Or you can just find the people who aren't into romantasy and are into exactly what you have to offer.
Yeah.
Like my trick when I go to these conferences, and it's not a trick, although I'll use the word trick because I'm being sincere and I mean it. There are 2 or 3 little hot button topics that I have an opinion that is different from I don't like the word mainstream, but different than what is mostly held. But the people who agree with me agree really passionately.
Passionately, yes.
Like we talked about stranger danger earlier. Yeah, you start talking the truth about stranger danger at a martial arts event where all these instructors, they know exactly what's on the line. They've also read Gavin de Becker. They know exactly what the score is. And they're like, oh, right on, man. And then now you have friends.
Yeah.
Right. The other one I go off on is how 90% of school lockdown procedures are built to protect the organization from lawsuit, not to save the life of any individual child.
Yeah.
And not everybody has heard that, but everybody who hears it, 98% of the people who hear it are like, oh yeah.
Oh, I can tell you, they would put a bunch of teachers in a room and they would talk about, the things you do in the first 10 seconds are about saving lives. The things you do in the first hour are about liability. Like they're not even hiding it really. Like it's about keeping themselves from getting sued. And even then, some of the advice they were giving us was really more about liability than safety. That our number one focus need to be making sure no kid had a phone. Like, well, that's because you don't want a recording from your institution showing up.
It's not because this amateur who was just fired off 30 rounds and can't hear his own heartbeat is going to hear your notification ding. Come on.
Yeah.
A real classic example, and then I can go off on this, but I'm talking to a relative of mine who is a high school principal. And before that, she just got the education. Before that, health and PE, and talking about her instructions. And she teaches junior health. And so if a lockdown happens and there's a bad guy out in the hall, she's going to stand in the door. This woman is 5'7". If she weighs 100 pounds, she's holding a cat. But she's a high school health teacher. She does not have a classroom that doesn't have at least one wrestler going to school on a scholarship next year and 2 linebackers.
Yeah.
But for liability reasons, the policy says she can't put those guys.
Oh no. We're the ones in the door. I literally had a hammer. So you're also not allowed to have weapons, right? Because you can't have weapons. But I can have a hammer to drive nails. And so when the police would show up at my classroom door in these drills, you set up a desk, but I would set mine up instead of pushed all the way to the door, 6 inches away, so that they would open the door, but then it would stop. And they would literally see me with a hammer. And every time the police would kind of cringe back and then they would go, oh, that's really good. Like, I'm not letting anybody near my kids.
Yeah, you live in Barcelona now, so this isn't as much of a concern for you. The best advice I've gotten is just bring a fire extinguisher, put it in your room. So you imagine you're some 17-year-old dipshit, feeling powerful, and you got the boner or whatever. You're marching in the hall. You open that door, you get blasted immediately with fire extinguisher gunk in your face, and then while you're blind, you get hit several times with the butt of the fire extinguisher.
Yep. I mean, it's a
And
big,
it's
heavy thing. I mean, we would tell,
yeah.
you know, some of
Mhm.
the trainings vary because they're being designed by lawyers and they're about, you know,
Yeah.
and so sometimes they were about, okay, let's get every kid involved. Let's have the kids literally pick up a book so they're ready to throw a book at a shooter.
Yeah.
And that's actually a really interesting one because there's some good research that, you know, your top marksman, when things are being thrown at them, cannot hit a target. Like
Yeah.
it's very upsetting, you know, if everybody's throwing books at you to try and do anything about it. So that's not certainly not bad, but again, you know, then the next wave would be no, no, make sure they all hide. Like, so the policies change because, I mean, and none of them were, hey, how can we make sure that we vote against having firearms be so accessible? That never were they actually, let's address what is, you know, because we can't touch that. That's
And if you tell
political.
me it's a
And I'm
mental
like,
health issue, that's
telling kids
great.
to throw books is not political. Because, you know, this is a political move as well. So we can talk about the guns, but
Yeah,
nope, never.
exactly. But yeah, that's the kind of conversation you start when you go to that conference.
Yeah.
And then you've made a friend who, when you say, "Hey man, the book's coming out, would you share?" Like, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then the other piece is you get your review team. You get 10 to 20 people who you can trust to leave a review of the book. You give them the PDF ahead of time.
Yes.
And their job is to drop a review on day one. You want to get up above 20. And the sad thing is, none of these people are your friends. Your friends, they love you. If you ask them to help you move, they'll spend the weekend with a truck in exchange for some cold pizza and warm beer, but they will not review your goddamn book.
It is wild to me. I mean, I'm like, you know, that's always the example I use. This person would give up an entire Saturday in exchange for a couple of slices of pizza. They will not spend 15 seconds writing a review, and they just don't understand. Like, they just
you know
don't
who will?
get it.
You know who will? The 12 writers you met the last time you went to a writers conference.
They get it.
So you find the people you've met at the writers conference, the writers operating at about your level that you know online. Maybe you followed one of those Facebook ads to books and found you really liked it, and you reach out to them, and you just get 20 professionals operating at about your level, and you make a little review club.
Yeah.
And
yep.
Then you have your people, because your friends aren't going to do it. Your parents might do it.
Right.
But no. Yeah,
another little tip, and you probably have used this as well, is when you say to somebody, can you write a review? It's scary. It sounds like you're saying, can you write 300 pages? If you tell them, will you put this in your own words? And you give them a model, it makes it so much easier. Same thing with blurbs. I used to say to people, can you blurb this book? And it just felt we would get very few blurbs back, you know, because they would go, oh, this is a lot. And now we'd go, and even when I would say, it can be very brief, like people are going, how brief is brief? And now I say, like, it can be this short. We need something that says, please buy this. It's really good. I really enjoyed this book. That's all you need. This was exciting. Now reword it your way because you're a writer. And they're like, oh, okay, a sentence. Yeah, that's all I need is a sentence, you know, especially, you know, I love my poets. I'm a poet as well. Poetry blurbers are the frickin' worst. They give me something that's a page long, and I'm like, I'm still just taking a tiny little line. I need a blurb. I don't need your review. You know, if you want to review it, wonderful. That's great. You can write you know, and so then I say to them, the thing you wrote as a blurb, that's the review. Please go post that. I'm using this line. That's, you know.
Yeah. And, you know, we're all talking about marketing techniques, which some people can feel a little manipulative about. And some people have a bad taste about marketing. But I will say that, you know, again, what we're doing is we're being nerdy about something we love.
Yeah.
And if somebody out there needs to read your book.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people need to read my book. How dare I get between somebody who needs my book and reading my book?
Yeah.
What a shitty friend would I be if I have a buddy, Alex, in Denver. He and his wife are expecting their new baby any minute now. What kind of shitty friend would I be if I didn't tell him about a book with 100 different ways to make sure that baby lives to take care of them in their dotage?
Right.
And and that's true of your book. Whatever you're writing,
that's the thing. Yes, even recognizing about a book that's a novel, even that, you know, a collection of poetry. There is somebody out there where that could be literally life-saving. And going into marketing thinking like that, this person.
And even if it's not life-saving, there are books that changed your life
that's what I mean.
Just made you feel really, really happy. You and I have gone off back and forth about Three Body Problem about how that broke our brain.
And so if Xi Jinping had said, I'm going to go to all the work to write these, but I don't feel like I need to tell anybody to read them, I
feel yucky about it. I feel yucky about it. So how dare you? And the other thing is, if you don't believe that's true of your book, go write a better book.
Write a better book first. Right. Yes. Well, that is my advice for everybody who gets involved in marketing is while you're marketing, you're also writing a better book. Like, people will come to me and say, which book is yours your best? It better be the most recent one. Like I'm improving, right? So, it's the next one. The best book I've ever written is the one that's going to come out in October. And then after that. So yes, but you're right. You have to believe that. And that's hard. Like that is hard to believe. I recognize when people are going, I feel it is difficult for me to say, you should read my book. It's really good, but you got to get to that place.
Yeah. And if you don't believe your book's good, either, ask people who go find an ex of yours who you're still friendly with and ask them if they think it's good.
Yeah.
Because you know what? If it's not good, they will tell you. My favorite beta reader is my favorite ex-girlfriend that I'm still friends with.
That's cool. That's a good call.
They care about you, and they don't give a damn if they hurt your feelings.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I can think of some exes.
Right.
Yeah, because you're right. They're not, that's and people, you're right. You've got the kind of relationship where they will tell you the truth. They're not somebody who's angry at you and is going to try and be hurtful. But an ex who's a friend, that's good. That's a good.
They will call you on your bullshit way better than your current person.
Yeah, because they don't have to live with the consequences.
Yeah, and they know your bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's good. Well, let's call it. Oh, I do want to ask before we end, do you have any advice? You're the perfect person for this. Going into Folks Week, what would be your advice for our listeners?
Going into which week?
Going into their next week. So they're listening to this show, comes out weekly, and what's a gem that they can take with them into the week?
We talking safety, we talking writing, we talking marketing, we talking role-playing games,
any of the above, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll give you two. Start listening to Bloodywood.
Did I? Okay, yeah. I have already taken that advice of yours. Yes, they are super fun. The videos are really fun too.
Oh yeah, and they're nice kids. Another one. Next time you make broccoli, dice up some avocados and toss it in there. A little bit of sea salt on top. This will change your life.
Really?
It is so good.
So it's broccoli, but are you grilling or are you?
So this is your steamed broccoli.
Steamed.
Steamed
avocado.
Your regular steamed broccoli, and you toss in that avocado. It has got that creamy texture. That is why people put cheese sauce on broccoli, but it's way better for you and it tastes better.
Avocado.
A little bit of salt,
and not as fancy. I mean, just sea salt.
Yeah,
doesn't even have to be,
or just regular salt, whatever. I like getting like the large grain kosher salt or sea salt because it feels cool to do.
I like there's rosemary salt if you can get your hands on some rosemary salt. But avocado and broccoli. I never would have thought of that.
Yeah, me neither. I don't even remember where I bumped across it. But it is life changing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, and I'm gonna have to share this with my dad because my dad puts mayonnaise, but that's the thing. He wants the creamy, right?
Yeah.
Avocado. That's a great idea.
It's crazy how good that is.
That's so great. Okay. Well, we will end there. Thank you, everybody. We will see you again next week. Have a wonderful week.
Thank you, Ben. Talk to you soon.
Here's a tiny bit of our bonus segment, just for supporters of the Patreon.
I wish more people engaged honestly and really about sex education with their kids, about the sex conversation with their kids, because this is absolutely a safety concern. Yeah. Whether it's you're talking about your early grade school kid being touched inappropriately, whether it's your late elementary kid who's being approached online, whether it's your tween who's getting the wrong kind of attention from a coach, whether it's your teen who's going on dates with people who might be violent, whether it's your adult child who is entering into a relationship that turns out to be abusive. talking about sex and talking about relationships, which when we're dealing with teenagers especially, or any adult, sex and relationships are the same conversation, is immensely important. And because our culture comes out of Puritans, it can be very difficult to have those conversations, but to be intentional, to be systematic, to be absolutely open.
If I take